Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder, to the tank review on the 2S38, a Russian premium light tank of battle rating 9.7 and rank 6. Exactly where it shouldn't be, because it's way too good, and this will become apparent when I compare it to tanks that have a rather similar design philosophy, but then just can't really keep up with this thing. Even tanks of higher battle rating are not as efficient as this thing in doing factually everything, and it will become apparent. Two more things before we go into the actual tank review. First, I have to thank here my French friend for collecting the data with me, for checking for changes, and also doing the test drives with me. And it would have been a much longer stat collecting experience without you. Thank you very much. The other thing is that I'm sorry for the lack of videos lately, but I kind of felt burned out after the 10 years anniversary sales, the Sturmtiger event, etc, etc. And while I still played, I just couldn't really press recording, and I had again way too much fun playing stuff with the French guy. So all those things brought me together in clearing my thoughts, in thinking for a couple of days about this tank. And the footage is from last week, so it's still very up to date. But one thing that didn't change, and that is really strange, is the battle rating of this thing. We have seen with the recent battle rating changes many mistakes at the hand of Gaijin, and to leave this where it is was also quite interesting, let's put it that way. And I cannot really quit the thought of that this is just a pay-to-win tank, that this is just the full Russian bias experience, and that especially the HSTVL, the Big Light Punts, and the Puma are looking at this thing and just thinking that they get fooled by Gaijin. But anyway, without further ado, let's start with the tank review. As usual, I'll start with the armor, and the immediate question is, what armor? That is little to nothing. The majority of it is alloy ABT 102, and it's not really that impressive. Now, if you look at the side boxes here, they look like hidden NERA or whatever packages, or ERA, whatever, but it isn't. It's just air, because this is also one of the features of the tank. We'll come to this in just a moment. So this is an absolute glass cannon. There is not really any survivability given due to sheer armor. You see, there is no composite armor, but we have an unusual tank layout in the interior. First things first, there is a fuel tank that sometimes really screws with the penetration of things that should easily go through. And then we have the 3 crew members, all in the hull, all in the front of the turret, in one line, quite literally. Now, from the front, if it is like this, you can easily one-shot it by hitting 2 of them, or also hitting the ammo rack. But from the side, all of a sudden, this is a hilarious experience, because usually you are used to shoot like here, where there is on Russian MBTs the ammunition carousel, and they just blow up, or you kill the crew. But nor is there an ammunition carousel, nor is there any crew. So I also had it quite often that people shot me here and did little to no damage. The same goes for the engine. Look how low to the ground it is, together with also the transmission. You shoot here and hit the radiators, which is basically not important. And there is also nobody in the turret. Yes, there is the ammo rack, and when you hit it, it will explode, but it's not as big and prominent as you would think it is. So when you just reverse around a corner, sometimes people are so confused, or they think you're going for the front. When they know this, they shoot here and hit nothing, and you just can gun them down with the autocannon, to which will come in just a moment. So we have no armor, which is best armor, and we have a ridiculous layout, which explains some of the problems. So in theory, it's absolutely not difficult to kill this thing, but in the heat of the battle, sometimes, especially when you blast bushes all over it to kind of hide its signature, if you will, then some people just shoot in places where they do little to no damage or not enough. So yeah, that's the first thing. I think let's continue with some statistical comparisons. Yes. So first things first, let's talk about the mobility, and the tank is not really that convincing. It's not particularly awful. While it has the weakest engine, it's also one of the lightest in this comparison, giving it a kind of average horsepower to ton ratio of 23.3. However, the top speed is right there with 70 kilometers per hour, and while also the reverse in this comparison is the worst with minus 20.4, that is still faster than the majority of other Russian tanks. And on top of this, also quite uncharacteristic for Russian tanks, is that this tank has neutral steering. So you can see this already gives you a little bit of a hint where this tank actually stands. Now let's talk about the business end of the 2S38 Derivacja PVO, and that is the 57mm 2A90. And while that sounds like the armament of half of a ZSU 57-2, it actually is so much more. We have an overall ammunition capacity of 148 rounds, and that is just so much more than the HSTVL or the VCC-80, and so you already can imagine where we are going. And we have a decent reload of 0.5 seconds, and that for a ready rack of 20 rounds of ammunition, and then you have to reload the ready rack. The turret rotation speed is the start of the actual gun handling. With 60 degrees per second, it's utmost excellent, and while the 5 degrees of gun depression are typical Russian, the 75 degrees of gun elevation already lets you give a good hint at where this is going. And we also have a really great elevation speed of 40 degrees per second, so you can almost be everywhere immediately with your gun where you want. And that is actually where we come to the next part, and that is the shell comparison. Now this is where it really gets full bias mode. First of all, the 2S38 is the only tank with an actual capable and useful APHE round. Yes, the Begleitpanzer 57 SEP round has much more TNT equivalent, but it only has less than a third of the pen, and 47mm is right at the edge of going through the exposed side armor of any tank, especially when it's slightly angled or at range, and that makes it not really useful, does it? And the Schützenpanzer Puma 74mm penetration shrapnel round has only 0.8 grams of TNT, which means it works completely different, and it should be a shrapnel shell, very similar to the way that you would think at first of a T-34 or KB-1 shrapnel shells. But no, this is a shrapnel shell on a programmable shell, so it should work versus anti-aircraft shells, much like the HEVT round on the 2S38, which in reality isn't a thing. It also should be a programmable shell that just throws all the fragments into the flight path of flying things and therefore destroys them. But HEVT in War Thunder works out most excellently, and especially when we then come to the guidance systems later of the Puma and the 2S38, we kind of see where it all then comes together. But back to the HEVT round of the 2S38. It just works. It one-shots everything. Helicopters, planes, and especially it's very good for drone hunting, with a muzzle velocity of 1000 meters per second. And then we come to the anti-tank capability that matters the most, and that is the APFSDS round. 225mm of penetration. It's not the very best, but the HSVTL should be much better. And also when you think of having 3 times faster reload on the 2S38, the difference doesn't really matter all that much, and that with 1500 meters per second muzzle velocity and good and post penetration fragmentation. This tank is an absolute murder machine. From time to time you actually have to take a break and reload your ready rack, and that then gives you the time to observe the surrounding, get again a situational awareness, and yeah, let your team catch up with you. So I have a new category, and that is the not so obvious statistics. So we can see that the 2S38 has, just like the Puma, 3rd generation thermal imaging for both the commander and the gunner, and we have a magnification of ×4 to ×9.4. You also have a drone and the ability of scouting, which the 9040C doesn't have, and you not just have a laser rangefinder but also a laser warning receiver that again only the Puma has, in this comparison at least. And you are also the only tank that not just has smoke grenades but also engine smoke system. And you're also the only tank that is amphibious, and well, you also have IRST, just like the Puma. And this is where this tank is really dangerous for flying things, because the IRST system doesn't give the flying things like planes or helicopters, drones or whatever, any sign of warning. But you have like the lead indicator like radar, and that means that you can lock on them and just throw the almost invisible shells into their flight path, and when they're flying just in a straight line for a couple of seconds because they think nobody's watching them, nobody's shooting at them, then the shells are just crashing into them and splash them. So this is where the tank is just so dangerous, as you can see with the gameplay. It was a joy to play, and sadly there were not that many drones in the air, although I think that this tank and how it got spammed out has something to do with this. So it's absolutely fantastic, and this is where the tank is just so great. So as you can see, there is literally nothing that this tank can't do, and this is part of the problem, because why is this tank at 9.7? It's just so much more capable than the HSTVL at the moment, and the HSTVL has been in the game for quite a while. So has been the Begleitpanzer. So the 2S38 at the point of introduction has everything, and the Begleitpanzer to this day doesn't have its APFSDS rounds that apparently it had in real life and would make quite the difference. And also the Begleitpanzer didn't have a stabilizer when it was introduced. Yes, it has a missile, but we leave that for a different video, because it also has to completely stop and then can fire it, and that almost in most situations will already spell doom if you cannot penetrate the enemy vehicle with your main gun, because you don't have APFSDS. So this has been the tank review of the 2S38, a fantastic all-rounder and specialist for everything at the same time. A tank that I think will be there for quite a while to stay on top of the food chain. Let me know your opinion about this premium vehicle. Is it really overpowered, or is it just the flavor of the month and then it kind of dies off? Or do you agree with me and it will stay there for quite a while? Do you think it's worth the purchase, or do you think, nah, I already have such a great lineup? Or do you think, yeah, it's perfect for my lineup? And as usual, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. Why not give a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, share this link with your friends, clanmates, and whoever else you can annoy with it, and we'll see each other on the ways in the skies and on the battlefields of War Thunder.